Before it became one of Glasgow's most elegant addresses, the area that would become Blythswood Square was open ground on the edge of a growing industrial city. In the 1790s, a 10-acre stretch of land was sold by the Campbells of Blythswood to a local textile printer from Anderston. He developed the area as Willowbank, a semi-rural estate on the rising ground west of the city, but it wasn't until 1802 that the land's transformation truly began. That year, William Harley, a textile magnate, merchant and visionary, often referred to as the Great Improver, purchased the Willowbank estate, including its mansion and surrounding grounds. Harley was one of the key figures behind Glasgow's westward expansion, also owning part of the rising ground to the north, which he named Garnet Hill. In 1804, he purchased a much larger tract, 35 acres of Blythswood land, directly from the Campbells, just west of the newly formed Buchanan Street. It was a bold move. Harley envisioned not just a garden or an estate, but an entirely new district, a new town of Blythswood, connecting the upper slopes of Blythswood Hill with the heart of commercial Glasgow. To bring his plan to life, Harley commissioned a street layout from architect James Gillespie Graham, known for his work with the Campbells of Blythswood. The square itself was laid out as a grand centrepiece, 4 stately terraces enclosing a private garden in the middle. By 1820, the vision had taken shape. The result was one of the city's most distinguished Georgian developments. All 4 terraces remain today and are Category A listed, which gives them protection, and are recognised as among the finest examples of Georgian town planning in Scotland. As decades passed, Blythswood Square's character evolved. In the mid-19th century, the square housed a number of prominent Glasgow families. One townhouse on the corner became infamous, the home of Miss Madeleine Smith, a 21-year-old socialite who stood trial in 1857 for the alleged arsenic poisoning of her lover, a man named Pierre L'Angelier. The case gripped the nation, reported in lurid detail around the world. It ended in a uniquely Scottish verdict, not proven, leaving her neither convicted nor cleared, but the scandal left its mark on the square's legacy. Today the square remains a symbol of Glasgow's impressive history, wealth, art, scandal and ambition, all hidden behind grand Georgian sandstone facades. But as attractive as the square is, not everything here is elegant drawing rooms and well-tended lawns. The square may be best known today for its symmetry, its polished offices, and its private central garden, which, like Greyfriars Kirkyard in Edinburgh, is strangely quiet, even at the height of the city's day. But beneath the surface, not everything adds up. For some, history seems to bleed into the present. Strange and unusual stories circle the square, and you'll find one of them at number 7. The story we touched on earlier came to a head here in 1857. Madeleine Smith, the young socialite accused of killing her lover, found herself at the centre of one of Scotland's most infamous murder trials, and it all began at this door. She had lived with her family in that grand corner townhouse at number 7. On the surface, her life had followed the expected pattern of a Victorian merchant's daughter: piano lessons, polite callers, and carefully managed courtships. But behind closed doors, something far less conventional had begun. A secret relationship that crossed the lines of class, propriety, and control. L'Angelier was a clerk, foreign Catholic, and far below the Smiths in social standing. Their meetings were kept secret, letters were exchanged in the dead of night, and over time, what began as romance grew possessive, even dangerous. When Madeleine tried to end things, L'Angelier threatened to expose her. He'd kept the letters, every correspondence, all of them, and he'd warned he'd show them to her father if she dared turn them away. On the morning of March 23rd, 1857, L'Angelier was found dead in his lodging house. The cause? Arsenic poisoning. Eventually, the letters were discovered. Madeleine was arrested. Her trial that summer at the High Court in Edinburgh drew crowds from across the country. The evidence against her was damning. She had purchased arsenic under false names, and L'Angelier had died just hours after she was believed to have met him. But the timeline was shaky. There was no direct proof she had administered the poison, and so they returned a Scottish verdict, not proven, which is not guilty, but not innocent either. Madeleine left Scotland shortly afterwards, and her family never fully recovered from the scandal. Number 7 changed hands, and Glasgow moved on. Or tried to. Today the townhouse that once belonged to the Smiths still stands. It's now an office, but some say the past has never left, that something still remains. For years there have been reports, rumours, stories about strange moments that seem to echo something long unresolved. An administrator once claimed she smelled perfume in the stairwell, old-fashioned, sweet and unmistakable, but there was no one else in the building. A legal intern recalled hearing footsteps on the upper floors when she was locking up for the night, only to find all the rooms empty and the alarm still set. A visiting architect, there to assess the building during a proposed refurbishment, said the hair on the back of his neck stood up as he passed the drawing room. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he said he now knew what fear felt like. Then there are the stories of the woman in black. Witnessed only from behind, she's seen standing at the first floor window, staring out into the square. Occasionally she's also seen drifting across the entrance hall and vanishing before she reaches the stairs. Some people think this could be the spirit of Madeleine herself, returning to the place where everything unravelled and her life changed. But if Madeleine is still present, she may not be alone. According to several sources, including a few local guides and folklorists, there's another figure tied to the story, a young man, well dressed, who's seen walking with the aid of a cane. He's often spotted on Sauchiehall Street, a short walk from Blythswood. He doesn't appear suddenly or vanish into mist. He walks by witnesses as if he's on his way somewhere he's been many times before. One woman, walking home late after a shift, saw him crossing the road outside Charing Cross. She described his movements as old-fashioned but not out of place, like someone from another era who hadn't realised the world had changed. He didn't make eye contact or react to traffic. She said he just carried on walking, oblivious to the world around him. A bartender finishing a smoke break outside a nearby hotel reported something similar. A man walking past on a cold evening, lightly tapping his cane against the pavement. He was gone by the time the bartender finished his cigarette, and he hadn't seen where the man had gone. He only noticed something was off when he realised the footsteps had made no sound. In both accounts, the figure bore a striking resemblance to L'Angelier, as described in court sketches from 1857. The clothes, the gait, even the walking stick. It's said he used to walk those very streets on his way to meet Madeleine in secret, and if the sightings are to be believed, then he never stopped. Ghost stories often grow from rumour, but there's something about this one that stays with people. Maybe it's the closeness to real events, the trial, the letters, the scandal. Maybe it's the lack of resolution. Not proven means never knowing. It means the question is still there, unanswered. Madeleine Smith may have not been found guilty in court, but in the public imagination, she was never truly absolved. And perhaps that guilt, that ambiguity, left an impression on the house, on the street, on those who pass the shadows of Blythswood Square, long after the working day is done. 2 figures, 1 trial, 1 unresolved ending, and 2 ghosts who, according to some, have never stopped circling each other. Not all the stories from Blythswood Square can be traced back to court records or newspaper headlines. Some haven't left much of a mark at all, at least not on paper. But if you speak to people who've worked in the buildings around the square, not just recently but over the last few decades, one story comes up more often than you'd expect. People don't always describe her the same way. Not exactly. But when they do, it's always something like this. A woman dressed in white, moving slowly, silently, from room to room. The sightings tend to happen in the old hotel. It used to be a private club, the Royal Scottish Automobile Club, back in the 1920s. Before that, it was a grand townhouse, like the rest of the square. And now it's a 5-star hotel, refurbished, elegant and polished, but still carrying the architecture of its past. High ceilings, long corridors, rooms where the floorboards don't always sit quite level. A former housekeeper who worked the night shift in the late 2000s recalled her first encounter. She just finished preparing one of the event rooms after a function, clearing glassware, folding linen, when she saw someone step across the corridor outside. She caught just the edge of a white sleeve, disappearing round the corner. She thought it was a guest, went to check, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no door closing, just that creepy feeling, the one that tells you something's wrong before your mind catches up. She finished her shift early that night, said she didn't want to be there after midnight, and wouldn't go back upstairs alone. Another time, a guest on the 2nd floor rang down to reception around 3 in the morning. They wanted to know who was in the hallway, said they'd seen a woman walking past the room twice, moving slowly. She didn't acknowledge the guest when they attempted to speak to her. When the receptionist checked the monitors, the corridor was clear. No staff were on that floor, and no other guests were out their rooms. It kept happening. Flickers, sightings, a figure in a long gown drifting through the hallways. Not frightening, exactly, but those who witnessed her couldn't help but feel unsettled by what they'd witnessed. People started to refer to her as that thing in white, the woman, you know her. She's almost always seen in motion, gliding from one room to the next, never turning her head, never acknowledging anyone else. A few guests have claimed she passed straight through a wall, as if walking through a long since walled up doorway, like the walls don't apply to her. One staff member, who spoke off the record, said he once tried to follow her, just to see. He was closing down one of the upper floors after a wedding party, and saw her crossing the far end of the corridor. He shouted to her, thinking it was a lost guest, but she didn't stop, just kept moving, until she reached the end of a hallway, and without breaking stride, vanished into a section of the wall where, as far as he knew, there had never been a door. After that, he started to carry a torch, said it felt better to walk those corridors with something in his hand. There's been speculation, of course, there always is. Some think she's linked to one of the many tragedies associated with the square. Madeleine Smith's story naturally gets mentioned, though there's no real evidence of a connection. The dress is always described as flowing, old-fashioned, but witnesses struggle to tie it to any one specific era. It could be Edwardian, Victorian, or even earlier. There are no clear facial features, just the sense of a woman moving past you, as though she belongs to a version of the building that no longer exists. Some feel she could be linked to the building's days as the Royal Scottish Automobile Club. There are rumours, difficult to confirm, of a woman who collapsed during a wartime gala in the 1940s, or of an unacknowledged death behind closed doors during the club's heyday. Others think she predates all of it, someone's spirit that clung to the original house long before it was ever a hotel, just part of the structure now. I think one hotel maid described it best. It's not like a jump scare kind of thing. It's worse in a way. It's like, when you see her, you know she's always been here. Like you just noticed her too late. There's another story that sometimes gets bundled in with hers, that's possibly connected, but possibly not. It's about a caretaker who supposedly died in a fire somewhere in the building decades ago. The details, as with many of these stories, are vague. No newspaper record has ever surfaced, but some former employees talk about tools being moved, lights failing in the boiler room, or hearing someone hammering when no maintenance staff were on site. It's the kind of lore that's often found in old buildings. The incidents are never enough to claim proof, but they are enough to make you hesitate before locking the basement door. Still, it's the woman in white people remember. She's like someone trapped in a pattern she can't break. If there's a reason she continues to haunt the hotel, nobody's found it. There are no death records, no names, just a figure that passes from one generation of staff to the next, who's never fully explained. Not every guest sees her, but some do, and when they ask about her, almost embarrassed, they're often met with the same response. You're not the first. There's a story in the square that circulated for well over a century. It's one of these stories that's strange enough to raise eyebrows and unique enough to stick. It centres on one of the grand Georgian townhouses during a time when these buildings were still private homes, long before the lawyers moved in or the square began its transformation into a space of offices, clubs and executive hotels. The house is never named directly, but the story first appeared in print in 1911, in a collection of ghost stories by Elliot O'Donnell, one of Britain's early chroniclers of the paranormal. O'Donnell gave the account only a vague title, The Haunted Bath, and located it simply in a house near Blythswood Square. But the details he included were specific and frightening. According to O'Donnell, the events began when a man, referred to as Captain W. de Smythe, moved into one of the square's elegant houses with his wife and young son. It said he was a practical man, well-travelled and rational, but something about the new home unsettled him from the start. Not the house as a whole, but just one room, the bathroom. It wasn't anything obvious. The fittings were fine. The windows opened, but the bathroom had a feel to it. Something was wrong. Something off about the atmosphere. Smythe described it later as a heaviness, as if the room was waiting for something. At first he avoided it, said he preferred to wash downstairs. His wife assumed he was being fussy, but after several weeks of avoidance, she began to press him. There was no reason not to use the bath, and closing the door, she told him, was the decent thing to do, and eventually he gave in. It was late evening. The light was already fading. Smythe lit 2 candles and placed them on the bath's edge. Then, half-dressed, he crouched to test the water. And that's when the first strange thing happened. The candles blew out. There was no draught. The windows were shut, but the flames vanished in an instant, plunging the room into total darkness. He froze, heart beginning to pound, and that's when he heard it. The sound of splashing. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone was bathing just feet away from him. But he knew that the bath was empty. He was positive of that. Then from the far corner of the room came the creak of a cupboard door. He turned, straining his eyes, and that's when he saw her. A woman, dressed in a long, formal gown, not misty or translucent, but fully formed. He staggered back in shock and slipped, landing hard on the tiled floor. She said nothing. She didn't even glance in his direction. She inexplicably stepped onto his back as if he wasn't there and walked calmly toward the bath. Smythe didn't move. He couldn't. He was on the floor, still half undressed, trying to make sense of what he was seeing and what was happening. Then he saw her lean over the tub and begin to strangle something or someone. He couldn't see who it was, but the water thrashed violently, as if someone was fighting for their life. The woman gripped the invisible figure with both hands, driving them under, and then, just as suddenly, the struggle stopped. She stood upright, flicked droplets from her arms, and turned, disappearing back towards the same cupboard she'd stepped out from. A second later, the candles relit themselves. The room looked exactly as it had before. The bath was empty, and the floor was dry. There were no footprints, no sign that anyone had ever been there, except for Smythe, lying on the floor, trembling, unsure whether to believe what he'd just witnessed. He didn't bathe again in that room, not ever. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, his son, a boy of around 8, ran screaming from the same bathroom. He claimed he'd gone in to fetch a toy, but when he looked toward the tub, he saw something floating in the water. An old man, he said, white hair, eyes open, just lying there. When Smythe and his wife rushed in, the bath was dry, but as they turned to leave, another figure appeared. A woman again, this time seen more clearly, tall, dark-haired, richly dressed. She appeared to glide past them without a sound and disappeared into the same cupboard. That was enough. The family packed up and left the house within a week. Later, they were told a story. Not a confirmed fact, but a piece of local knowledge passed along by a former neighbour. Years earlier, the house had been home to an older man, a man of means, and his much younger wife. One night, the man was found dead in the bathtub. The death was ruled accidental, a fainting fit perhaps, but some found it suspicious. His wife had a reputation for losing her temper, and shortly after his death she left the country, inheriting the estate and disappearing from view. No charges were brought, no investigation reopened, but the timing and the nature of the visions seemed too precise to ignore. If the stories are to be believed, something about that death had soaked into the room. Over the years, the story of the haunted bathroom has appeared in various forms. One version claims the event took place in the 1830s. Another says the haunting carried on long after the Smythe family left, with later tenants describing the same coldness in the air and the same hesitation before stepping into the bath. A woman who once worked in the building after it became an office claimed the bathroom door would sometimes be found wide open in the morning, even when she was positive she'd locked it the night before. As we've mentioned, the house itself has never officially been identified. O'Donnell never gave an address, possibly to avoid legal trouble. According to his account, the landlord threatened to sue when word of the haunting got out. Whether that part's true or not, it does add another element of discomfort. A sense that the truth, if it ever was clear, was pushed aside in favour of appearances. The neighbourhood changed, the private homes became offices, the clubs moved in. Eventually, the building may have been converted entirely, its rooms altered, its walls painted, its history obscured by new plasterboard and modern fittings. But if you believe the story, one room never quite shook what happened there. People still pass through Blythswood Square every day, to work, to eat, to stay the night, and few of them would guess what's said to have taken place behind one of these front doors, and even fewer would believe it. There's something especially disturbing about a haunted battlefield, or a prison, or a place of execution. But you expect those places to hold trauma. You enter them prepared to feel a little scared. But stories like this one, set inside a private home, in a bathroom of all places, hit differently. A bathroom is where we're most vulnerable. It's where we shut the door and expect a moment to ourselves, not just for privacy, but for control. It's where you go when you're upset, when you need to catch your breath, or wash your face in the mirror and pull yourself back together. It's meant to be safe, a place where nothing unexpected happens. And maybe that's what makes this story so frightening. The idea that even there, something could be waiting, watching. Captain Smythe wasn't walking through a ruin or an abandoned asylum. He was trying to take a bath in his own house. He lit candles. He checked the temperature of the water. And then something he couldn't explain unfolded around him. The idea that a room like that could be haunted, that it might already hold something you didn't invite in, feels wrong in a way that's hard to name. It breaks a rule we don't usually say out loud, that the bathroom is the one room that you should always be safe. When you hear about a haunting in a space like that, the fear it creates is different. It isn't just about what's seen, it's about what it does to your sense of control. If you can't trust the most private room in your home, where does that leave you? And maybe that's why this story stuck around for over a century. Because it isn't just about a ghost. It's about a moment of quiet safety, turning suddenly cold, a familiar room revealing itself as something else.